Greetings and welcome to the stream. This is Ron from Terror of the Twin Sun. Terror of the Twin Sun is a functional division within the Order of the Twin Sun, formally, actually. Um, so we're at a cafe here in Berlin, and today we're covering an astrological configuration known as a full moon. Now, a full moon occurs when the solar placement is 180 degrees opposite to the lunar placement. Currently, the moon is waxing into the energy of Scorpio. So, a lot of people have actually been trauma dumping lately, unnecessarily. There's a huge reptilian sort of behavioral characteristic that is tied to trauma dumping and trauma culture, wherein victimization and victimhood is taking the foray. This allows for a number of things, primarily transformative energy that's tied to the Muladhara chakra. This is the root chakra. This is procreative energy that is tied to sexuality. It's tied to deep polarization. It has to do with the chrysalis of fixation towards the lunar energy in Scorpio. And because of such, like I say, there's this huge reptilian thing going on wherein people will use analogs primarily to psychically inflict through psychic vampirism a great deal of unnecessary trauma. This usually indicates a spiralistic design. It's kind of fractal, and the way it actually evolves, um, it spirals. So, like, trauma begets trauma, and it curves in such a way, much like a happiness spiral would. But unfortunately, it goes very deeply within the survival instinct in which Scorpio taps into. This has to do with sublimation of Taurus in the opposite, and the finger of God, the yod formation, pointing to primarily um, the fool's journey in the first house and the energy of Gemini in the third. Um, but it moves, as we know, on the third. The full moon is going to be in Sagittarius, opposing Gemini. And the thing about Gemini is that on a solar level, we are being programmed to understand technologies, to understand mirrors in terms of the people we meet. And often the people we meet will reflect us. And often, if we're not evolved, or I hate the word evolution, but if we're not actually reflecting our truer purpose, we will inflict harm upon the mirror that people will tend to put up for us. Therefore, this sort of dumping has a double effect in which the actual projections we place into the mirror as a technological or perhaps psychical tool for our own sort of evolution will allow for us to ascend in some sort of way. The lesson here is essentially moving from the eighth to the ninth house. Okay, and when this occurs, we move from a fixed house to mutable fire. So it's from the degenerative qualities of Mars, of Pluto, which of course is the ruler of the underworld, and the transformation of the secret fire. This is the secret flame. This is like the dharmic path that is hidden, the sort of secret information of the heavens. This is Promethean flame. So we're talking about procreation, we're talking about primordial urges, we're talking about the beginning of cosmic consciousness, the beginning of our own inventions, including fire as a provocative, tool to reflect on something. That's what I'm talking about here: technologies, mirrors, essentially the ability to see in terms of an analog, in terms of reptilian, capacity, use these things in order to convey or to sort of dump or to transfer energy in such a way that it can be ultimately siphoned. Um, what I see here in the month of, well, June, on the 3rd, is an opening from the third to the ninth house. When this occurs, there is the initiate and there is the master. There is the priest, and then there's the guru. There is the student, and then there's the master, the professor, the adept, whatever. Um, and with this, there is a possibility of learning lessons that have to do with philosophical discourse. It has to do with your own existential representation in terms of what you've studied, what books you've read, who you encounter in terms of a guru in your life, how they reflect upon that, how they know instinctively what you are, how you're supposed to be, or what you've been in the past. For example, I have a guru who has eyes on the back of her head. It's a city of hers. She's developed it over time, and she's able to see anyone's past in terms of what they've done, in terms of where they've been, in terms of a cyclical, incarnational aspect of what they've done in past lives. This is called sanskara. This is the ability to understand somebody's record and how it's been turning in terms of their general musicality, how they go about producing their life creatively, how often your grooves are the same as a last life, for example, and how often they can spin in such a way that if you are, geared towards a more darker side, or perhaps, darker seeds, you can eventually burn those out through this full moon. Primarily, it has to do with confronting oneself to see the ego, to see also your role as a leader, your role as a harbinger of informations, how you treat these informations, how you've cleansed your practice in such a way that you can be humble in terms of leading. Often leading requires one to sort of bend over to pull the sword up, or perhaps in some for some people this is going to be a huge ego death in terms of their own capacity to try to manipulate or control structures, or perhaps organizations, cities, societies, anything that's to do with politics. We already see it. We already see a sort of cleansing of the Vatican. The Vatican no longer is, so much of an evil agency as it was 10 years ago, when there was massive pedophilia and reptilian fucking, behavioral characteristics all over that. And I think it's a phenomenal thing. I think we're gearing towards some mode of ascension. Um, the shitty part is that in the past 2 days it's been once again extreme cyclical, trauma dumping, really really ripping the hay, and like really going in, and people just essentially getting into these toxic situations in which they realize through their mirror how much they are operating in such a negatively downward spiral, to the point where even romance is considered to be something like fucking like an old loop, an old paradigm, something where it's like I project into this the expectation of pain delivering love, of pain delivering love. No, that's the old way. And perhaps now you can find that there are people who are becoming pregnant with this information. There is a gateway right now during Gemini season where the peak on the northern hemisphere is blooming in terms of summer attitude. Everyone wants to fuck, everyone wants to procreate. And perhaps there's something about this wherein what is being harbored in terms of the procreative act is essentially not only children who are going to be leaders or teachers or people who are going to guide us in terms of this path towards ascension. No, it also is information we digest through the digestive fire of Agni in our own sort of plexus, and how we process that information is tied to the dualistic mind of Gemini in the third house. So the idea here is to look to the expressions or the egos of those who you find to be true mirrors to themselves or to others. Look to those who have the capacity to not only see information, but see beyond it, see into the grid, and to see that there is also some form of connectivity. This is like a hypothesis. This is something where it's like a semiosis. There's a sea change going on in terms of the link that we can put from one mirror to another, in which there will be a reflective quality, and we can create, perhaps even to the nth degree, any form of geometric or sacred geometry that stems beyond a triangle, and furthermore into the full circle union of yoga. So these are all just certain predictions I have for now. Now, when it comes to the mystery of the finger of God, the moon is pointing to the sun, and around the sun is the energy of Taurus as well as Cancer. There's something about Mother Earth, her forces, her energy, that is possibly going under duress now through some sort of shift. But this is a shift that is based on her pregnancy, on her fertility, and fertility rites have been a huge motif in the last 2 months since Belton, if you pronounce it Belton. Basically, Belton was a Celtic or Druidic ritualistic sacrificial ceremony that involved fire to disintegrate individuation, to bring forward cultures and communities, to bring forward the collective good in terms of what we can harvest. Now, this theme of harvest is a big thing. You can harvest energy. You can harvest the energy of the sun as a pranic force, and direct it towards the common good in some sort of way. At the same time, there are things that are darker in nature that have to do with harvesting of energy, and all this trauma dumping and all this psychic manipulation has to go out the door. It has to be old paradigm at this point. I think it is clear. At the same time, at least in a curvilinear way, the constant and incessant struggle between dark and light is inevitable at this point. And the next 10 years are going to prove to be an interesting field ground when it comes to the progression of inflation, the progression of wars that are based on water, that are based on also agriculture, food, and also based on the reactivity towards climate change, the movement into interstellar galactic spheres that have to do with universalization of monies as well, universal healthcare, the disintegration of boundaries when it comes to nations. And I find it extremely fascinating what's going on in terms of all that. The implications are huge if there is a war, and beyond it, even more huge in terms of who wins and how they negate the old paradigm. They negate the old cyclical, sort of energy manipulation, energy vampirism that feeds off the children of humanity. So that's something possibly to consider in terms of this full moon. There's going to be a lot of insights, I would say, that have to do with this idea of impregnation, uh, insemination, dissemination of ideas, the production of those ideas into a formulaic book, or perhaps even a tome or a grimoire, are on the horizon. Teachers are coming out of this. Teachers are being born out of this. So perhaps you should look inside yourself to see what kind of teacher you are doing all of this. Um, yeah, I do wish you well. This is Ron from Tarot of the Twin Sun, the Order of the Twin Sun, signing out. And have a good one.